Life lessons from a 98-and-a-half-year-old facing World War II and the Battle of the Bulge, and a heroic baptism with Mr. Oliver Thibodeaux on Spirit Spire starting right now.
Broadcasting from the Cathedral of the Assumption in Louisville, Kentucky, this is Spirit Spire. And now, here is your host.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of Spirit Spire. We believe this is a very special and an inspirational episode, and to join with me in a special return guest appearance is our former co-host, Brian Kane.
Hello everyone, good to be back.
Yeah, he's here, and we have a very special guest, a good long-term friend of mine, Mr. Oliver Thibodeaux, Tip for short. And as we had talked before the episode, you got Tip from, how did you get the nickname Tip?
Well, my dad was known as Tip before me.
That's right.
And for a while, I was called Little Tip. So
now
and does that comes from your last name of Thibodeaux, you think?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
That's awesome.
That's very good.
And you grew up in Louisiana? Is that right?
No, I was born in Macomb, Mississippi.
Macomb, Mississippi. That's right. That's right. Because we when I was a kid, I got to know you, but I've never gotten to know you through this story. I got to know you at the St. Elizabeth Senior Center, and maybe a little bit before that, when my grandma was actually, helping and serving. She was teaching memoirs classes. They did chair volleyball. And I played a lot of ping pong and Wii Bowling with you in those days. And how many 300 games have you bowled now in Wii Bowling?
50.
50?
Right.
Oh, awesome. My goodness.
So do you have memories of Mississippi? What year were you born? First off,
1924.
1924, okay. So you are 98?
98.
98 years old. Happy birthday.
Well, I was 98 on July the 25th.
Hey, that's my son's birthday.
Look at that.
How about that?
That's pretty cool.
The feast of St. James the Greater.
Wow.
And then, I got a blank.
So I asked if you have memories from Mississippi. What are some memories from your really, really early childhood?
I remember playing on a hill that was there, but that was when I was 3 years old. So I moved to Paducah, Kentucky at that age, and actually it was at Lone Oak, Kentucky, which was about 10 miles outside of the city of Paducah.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
So,
do you remember why your family moved?
yes, my dad worked for the railroad, and he got transferred to the railroad shops, IC railroad shops in Paducah.
Okay.
So that I was...
So what was Paducah like as you grew up?
In the 1920s. So if you were born in 1924, that means...
1927, right before the
24.
Great Depression.
You were born in 1924, but you moved to Paducah when you were
1927,
27.
yes.
So this was like 2 years before the Great Depression hit.
Right.
So those are some of your earliest memories are of sort of the Great Depression and...
Well, I didn't know much about the Depression other than the fact that I lived through it. And that was about all, because my parents were the ones that did the suffering, wasn't finding the ways of putting bread on the table and keeping us warm and comfortable and everything else. We used to go, my mother used to go and make a trip down to Jackson, Mississippi, where we had relatives, and they raised sugar cane.
Mm-hmm.
And she'd bring back a suitcase full of sugar cane, and we would sit by the fire and our parents would cut the stalk part on the outside, and then we'd chew the inside and get the
good stuff, right?
So that was
Right.
a treat.
Oh yeah, that was a real treat. We had
And that was during the Depression.
We had coal burning stoves, but we didn't put them up until the fall had hit.
Okay.
After the fall, then we would put the stove up and we'd warm around the stove. But before that time, we had a hearth that had a fireplace in it, and we would sit around and the gas that came out of the coal that we used in the fire would cause little sparks like to burn, you know how they do.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was a real treat to sit around, chew on a sugar cane. And, but that was just one of the things that I recall.
Did your dad keep his job sort of throughout the Depression, or do
Yes.
you remember if he lost his job at all? Or
No, he got promoted to foreman,
oh wow,
and because of the lack of education, he had to eventually give it up because my mom would figure out his payrolls for the people that work under him.
wow.
And he was incapable of doing that, but she did that, and then, of course, as he would bring home the cards, the time cards that the people had earned, and she would figure out what payment they would make.
Wow.
So
was he more kind of a people person?
He was a machinist.
Okay.
He was a machinist, and he could do anything for cars. In those days, he never charged anybody for working on the cars. He enjoyed working on them.
Yep.
Kind of perplexed my mother several times when we had plans, or she had plans, or they had plans to go somewhere, and over here comes somebody with a car that needs to be worked on, and he would give them priorities over what we were planning. So,
Oh man. Well, he
That
could have opened
didn't-
up his own shop, it sounds like.
well, he could have, but
How many siblings do you have, Tip?
I have 2 sisters,
What are their names?
Norita and Edna. Edna was the oldest, and Norita was the younger. And then I followed. And of course, I was spoiled because I was the only boy in the family. This I remember that the things that I used to imagine, of course, I was a cowboy and I was a fireman and all these other things that children normally take up that I never did get. They didn't have a garbage pickup then, so I didn't want to be a garbage man, but
Well, and we were kind of saying before the show started how you know, a lot of kids today have so much, and they don't even necessarily realize how much they had. But you had to depend on your imagination.
well, nowadays they have, everybody has a cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, basically, and some of them get into trouble by using the cell phones and have some very complicated and life-altering experiences because of it.
Yes.
And this is something that I didn't have to go through that phase of life because people were more or less good people. You had neighbors that they would come in and close up the house if it started raining while you were away from the house.
Oh, yeah.
And they'd borrow things from each other and return them. And sometimes we wouldn't even be home, and Miss Barry across the street would come over and help herself to certain cooking supplies that my mother had. We used to, during the summer, we would can goods for winter use, and all kinds of vegetables.
It sounds to me like you had these really rich experiences with simple things,
Right.
You know, and young
Very
people
much
today,
so.
I mean, you're talking about sitting in front of a fireplace, watching the sparks fly from the fire and eating sugar cane.
Right.
And kids, it seems like many ways don't ever get to have those experiences because they get focused on things that are more entertaining in their minds or whatever it might be. But in many ways, like you're saying, it seems to take away from their sense of imagination. They're not creative.
Right.
They let other people be creative for them, and that can, I think, make things more difficult and not as fulfilling for young people today. But you maybe be able to share some of that
Well,
with your story.
I remember that we had two big oak trees out beside the thing that had roots running, and I'd dig up underneath there and make. I had a block of wood, a couple of blocks of wood that they were the finest little cars you ever saw, you know, in my imagination. But as far as nowadays, they go to the shop and get a car that my imagination would have visualized out of that block of wood.
Yeah, you could make any car out of that block of wood. They have to go buy a new car to get the next car.
Right.
Right.
They got different sizes, different.
I wanted to ask you, Tip, you know, as we kind of, you know, maybe conclude the early part of your childhood, and then maybe we can move into a little later in life. But what are some memories some memories of lessons you learned as a younger child? You know, are there any things that you remember your parents saying, or maybe a teacher, or like what are some of those early words or phrases that stand out to you that helped shape you into the man you became?
Well, I remember when I was going with my dad. He went hunting, and he took me with him, and we started to. I used to be considered as living in the country from the boys that I went to school with in Paducah. And I went to Lone Oak High School for the first 4 years, and then I transferred to the St. Mary's Academy so I could make my first communion. No, that was St. John's I went to make my first communion. Then I transferred into St. Mary's Academy later. But remember these memories of how if a host was dropped during the time of people going to communion, they would put a what's
A purificator or a
cloth, the cloth that goes over the chalice that they would put down there, and nobody would go in that vicinity whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, they just reach out and pick up the host and go on with everything, but they would take holy water and wash that whole area down with holy water after Mass was over.
Yeah.
And these are the kind of things that ceremoniously I still think that we're better off by.
So I asked you about lessons. So it sounds like there was a lesson there
of
reverence.
Deep
Right.
reverence.
The reverence, they seem to hold things more in reverence than what it was, it is now.
I noticed that in my kids. I have 4 that are 6, 4, 2, and a baby. And so they're all toddlers and whatnot. But in the bigger ones, we have so many things that there's this throwaway mentality of, oh well, I'll just get a new toy, I'll just get
Right.
I think that kids who were 3, 4, 5, 6 years old in your day, they had a much better understanding of what a treasure it was to possess something and to own something.
They enjoyed the item itself more so than turning it up and throwing it away.
Right.
Yeah, because if you did that, you weren't going to have another one.
Right.
And to me, that speaks to the reverence people would have shown the host during Mass. Because when you don't have a lot of possessions and things, and you do show more respect for what you do have, it sounds to me like that carries over into our reverence for God as well. Whereas today, a lot of young people seem to have a lot of things, and yet they don't have this reverence or understanding.
That's what I was trying to say, and I couldn't.
Yeah.
I couldn't voice it the way you do.
No, but well, that's why we were talking. That's the discussion. That's how it works.
It's really.
Wow.
Even neighbors had more respect for neighbors than they do nowadays.
Yeah. I mean, how many people even know their neighbors today?
Well, I know the ones on the one side of me and the other side of me. I used to know the ones across the street, but they sold their house and moved, so I don't know who's moved in there now. So
yeah, it's harder.
That's about it, just the two there.
Yeah. It's something
I'm not really close to them.
Mm-hmm.
It's something we've talked about on this show before. Is sort of the breakdown of the neighborhoods and of the communities that now people are more isolated.
And they're not only isolated, but in some cases, they seem to think that the neighbors are out to get them. Mm. I mean, like we had a representative that, because they blew leaves on the other guy's lawn, they got in a fight, and he got ribs that were broken, and
oh my gosh,
it's
sad.
Those are the kind of things that come from people not knowing anybody. Mm-hmm. They're isolated and they don't know.
Yeah.
Any other lessons from childhood that come to mind? Anything? I'm thinking especially of maybe things that your mom told you about how to live life or how to treat people.
Well, my mom always, if she couldn't get something for us children, then she wouldn't want it at all. I mean, that's the way it was in those days. If you didn't, you loved each other so much that you showed it by sometimes not accepting things that people would offer because they didn't offer enough. I mean, they didn't have enough to offer to cover the whole children and parents alike.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So they did. My mom looked out for us, you might say, that if she couldn't have enough of it to give it to us, then she didn't want it either. So that way she didn't have to
It's a lot of sacrifice.
break down and say, well, I don't. Who am I going to give this to?
Between
Can't give it
the
to all
kill-
3 children,
Wow.
then she didn't want it.
Who's the first president you remember, Tip?
Well, I wasn't very political, so I didn't. I guess Roosevelt was about the best one that I started noticing politics, I guess, around that time when Roosevelt was in office. He did a lot of good.
He was there for a while.
Yeah,
Yes,
do
he was.
you remember what year he was elected? I don't know that off the top of my head.
I don't either.
I think it was in the early 1930s.
Yeah, that's kind of the
was
time frame.
Quite a while.
So you were maybe 9-10 years old, maybe something like that. I'm thinking, did you guys have a radio when you were a kid?
And not at first, but we got one later on. You got one, it was an Atwater Kent, I remember that. And it had a metal, it was a cabinet size that sat on the floor. My dad really liked to listen to Lowell Thomas. He was a newsman that came on, and nobody moved while. I remember one time it was the coal stove, we had a shaker on it. You shake the ashes down, and so that the fire could have room to blaze up and be warm inside the house. And my dad was going to listen to one of the Joe Louis fights. And my mom asked him to shake the stove down. And he got down to shake it, and he shook the burnout coals down. And he get back in his chair, and they said, "The fight is over. The fight is over." So Joe Louis had hit him with one punch and went down.
Wow, that's amazing. Now you had also, I'd heard you tell me this once before about getting a driver's license, but you had something before your driver's license, right?
I had my student pilot license. When I first went up in an airplane, I was learning to fly myself. And the instructor sat in the front seat. I sat right behind him. It was in a Piper Cub. And we hardly got off the ground, and he says, he had like a funnel stuck into a pipe, and then I had earphones that came off of that thing that I put on. And he said, take over the controls. And I thought, well, I'm hearing things. I didn't think that. I mean, he turned the plane over to me, and we're only maybe 100 foot off the ground.
Oh, wow.
And
How old were you at this time?
let's see, must have been a freshman in high school.
14 years old. So you had a pilot's license before a driver's license
Right.
at 14 years old.
Well, I didn't have a
Student pilot, right?
Yes, I didn't have a driver's license until after the war.
Wow.
So this was before the war. So
Who had the connection to a plane? Was this a family friend, or how did
no,
you?
I rented a plane. The instructions, considered that you had to have a plane to fly. So when he said, and I thought it was imagination, and then he said it again, take over the controls, and I thought, no, it can't be. And then he turns and he says, what's the matter, you deaf? So I took over the stick, and he said, pull back on it. And I pulled back on it, and we went up at a steeper angle than we had been gaining height and altitude. And then he says, push forward on it. So I pushed forward on it, and he grabbed it.
Not that much.
He grabbed it, not so hard. So, but anyway,
So
we went on.
how did you have the money to rent a plane?
My mother used to take in washings, and I used to sell tickets on weekends for other people that wanted to fly across the city. They had a...
So you worked at almost like an airport.
Right. I worked at the airport.
Okay, all right. There's the connection.
One of the other...
I always wondered that. Like, how does
One of the other
work?
jobs that I did was that when they have nuts on a plane, or at that time they did, I guess they still have them. Maybe they have something else now, but they used to put a wire through the nuts so they couldn't vibrate loose.
Yeah.
And then they tie the wires through them so that they came there. And I used to do that because they didn't want to have the
Plane come apart?
well, they didn't want to have the machinist to work on it.
Yeah.
I mean, I could do it and still make the machinist could work on other things. So
Very cool. So there's a connection here between the radio that you had, not necessarily as a kid, but just the fact of radio communication in general and flying that I think will connect
nowadays,
to your time in the war.
nowadays
and
I
beyond.
went on a flight about 3 weeks ago. And
Really? You weren't flying this time, right?
No, I was they offered me to, but I had
You have a picture of it, I guess?
I got some pictures that I made up in the air.
Well, we might conclude this segment right
Yeah.
now and pause so we can maybe find those pictures of you flying, and then we'll also get into more of Tip's life after this break. We'll be right back on Spirit and Spire. Family Renewal Project is our local Theology of the Body apostolate in service to the Archdiocese of Louisville. They are having a crash course on Theology of the Body on February 3rd and 4th at St. Margaret Mary Catholic Church. This is an incredible opportunity to begin exploring God's master plan for each one of us. theology of the body is indeed the answer that we have so desperately needed to this current culture of chaos and confusion. To learn more or to register, go to bit.ly/TLB1-CC-0223, or to see the calendar, go to familyrenewalproject.com/events. Welcome back, everyone, to Spirit Inspire. We've been talking to a great man who's I've known for many years, Mr. Oliver Thibodeaux, Tip for short. And with me is my good friend and former co-host, but he's back for a special appearance, Brian Kane.
Yes, indeed.
And we've been talking to Tip about his early days, his childhood, and what that was like growing up from Macomb, Mississippi to Paducah. And getting from there, first off, he had a pilot's license before a driver's license, right? Student pilot.
We just got to see some pictures of the most recent flight 2 weeks ago.
Right. He was on a plane 2 weeks ago, and we got to see some pretty awesome pictures of that. So, yeah. But I figured I'd pass it over to Brian, and he's going to ask a few questions for Tip about the days from childhood onward. So, Brian.
Thanks, John. All right, Tip. So we've heard now a little bit about growing up outside of Paducah, and we heard some stories from high school, and then you were starting to tell us that it was right after high school that you got the draft notice, and they wanted you to go for World War II.
During the time that I enlisted, it was voluntary enlistment.
Oh, it was? Okay.
It wasn't a draft notice that I got.
Okay.
It was because I volunteered
and
to go into aviation cadet.
Aviation.
I took the test in Louisville and passed it, and I got out of school on a Friday and started. I went to.
Like a recruitment office type thing, or?
I went to Camp Atterbury, Indiana, and when by troop training, I was sent to Keesler Field, Mississippi for my basic training.
Okay.
They said I had to take basic training before I got into the cadet training.
Yep.
So,
and after cadet training, you went where?
After I had the basic training, then they sent me to Jefferson Barracks, Missouri, which was a place where everybody went, and they didn't. And then they said I had to go to a permanent place before I would apply for aviation cadet. So I went to, they sent me to Madison, Wisconsin.
Okay.
And talked me into taking a radio operator mechanic school, which in case I got shot down and would also be a part of the cadet training, which would ease the amount of knowledge I had to gain when I took the cadet training.
Now at that time?
So then I was sent, before I finished the course, I was sent overseas.
Oh, wow.
Went over on the Queen Elizabeth, which had 16, I think it was 16 or 14 bunk beds in a stateroom. And then...
so this is, so the Queen Elizabeth, for some context. Okay, so can I just get context here? So you were in a radio training course, right?
Right.
That would coincide with his aviation cadet training.
Right. So you're thinking you're going to be an aviation cadet, but all of a sudden they're like, "Hey, we need you." What, on the front lines? Are you going in as infantry or? Are
No,
they?
they sent me over to a base air depot in Manchester.
Okay.
It was actually in Warrington, England, and we docked it in Scotland,
Okay.
Greenock, Scotland, and then I applied again for aviation cadet and was supposed to come back to the States on a Monday. And on a Friday, there was a directive came through that said too many were using aviation cadet to get back to the States. So they said nobody else would come back from overseas for that. So
And you're about 19 at this time, you think?
that made me mad. So I went down and I knew I could fly the smaller planes that were used for the as a spotter for aircraft for it was a term was
For some of the bigger planes, like the bombers, or
no, they're small planes that are used for
like fighters?
no, they're used to tell the section that uses they shoot the bomb out and it explodes and hits the and then
It's
they
like
have
artillery.
spotters in the air that tell them for the adjustments to make.
I gotcha.
So-
So these are artillery strikes.
Right, artillery.
Yeah,
That's what it was.
Okay.
So I told-
and this is land artillery.
Right.
So the planes are flying and they're looking for targets. And the artillery shoots something. The planes watch where it goes,
Right.
and then they can say, okay,
They
10,
adjust-
10 degrees north or whatever.
Right.
and-
They
yeah.
adjust
Wow.
their aim. So they asked me if I'd had any artillery training, and I said no, but I can learn. And they said we'd rather teach them to take off because they don't come back. So I volunteered for the infantry then. Then I went to Swindon, England for my advanced basic training, infantry training. And from there on, I went to
So pause there. Well, at advanced basic. So obviously the Allies are working together. Who's running the advanced basic training? Is this an American run operation, or are they working with the Brits to train everybody? Like, are the people you're with at advanced basic, are those all Americans, or is it a lot of people from different countries?
I never knew.
Okay.
My goodness.
I was busy.
Oh yeah, you were caught up in all of it, right? My goodness, there was a lot of historical perspective that we might have on it, but you lived right through it. And it seems to me like when you found out that the aviation cadets were being trained to take off but not to land because they didn't expect them to come back.
Well, that wasn't the basic training. That wasn't cadets.
Oh, not the cadets, but the
that
actual.
was the field artillery spotters.
Right. But learning that they weren't coming back is
Right.
why you were like, well, I don't want to die. I would rather join
Well-
the infantry and have better chances, would you say?
No,
Or what?
it just made me mad that I wasn't going to get to be an aviation cadet. So
So they weren't
I
willing to
wanted-
train you?
Well,
I
then no,
wanted to
'cause
get into the war. I mean,
guys were using it to get back home. He actually wanted to be an aviation cadet. Everybody else just wanted to get back to the U.S.
Wow.
So they said no more guys are going home.
Gotcha.
Okay, so you sign up for the infantry,
right.
and then what happens?
Then after basic training, I was sent into the Battle of the Bulge.
What was that like?
That's the part I didn't want to talk about because it was so humongous. But there was one incident that you might be interested in that while I was there, one of the fellows that I'd been in training with was an atheist, and he always was trying me because I had a strong religious training, and I believed in God, and he didn't. And he would always needle me about it. I couldn't understand how anybody could not believe in God. And when he got half his head blown off, he wanted me to baptize him. And I said, I don't have to pour water over your head, because you can be, just by desire to want to be, you can become baptized.
Yeah.
And he
Baptism
said,
of desire.
no, that won't do. You got to pour the water over. So I did. I poured the water over, and I blessed him and gave him what the priest would have given him and baptized him, and he died. So that's something that you can't forget. There's no way that I can ever forget it, even though I've tried.
What was his name?
I don't remember. Truthfully, I don't. I've tried to forget it, but that's one of the horrors of war that I just didn't want to be part of. But it made me more set in my belief in God, that even though he didn't believe in God, when time came, he wanted to believe in God. That maybe, who knows, maybe something I said in arguments with him finally got through to him. I don't know. But he wanted to be baptized, and I did. So he was baptized.
Well, just maybe, Tip, one day you'll get to meet that man. That's the hope, right?
If he made it, yeah.
That's right.
If he didn't make it, I don't want to see him.
Well, right. Right.
If your story's if the timing of your story is true, Tip, it sounds pretty likely that you're going to see him in heaven. It doesn't sound like there was much time after he was baptized.
Well, I don't know.
Leave it to
I
God.
didn't know enough about his life other than the fact that he didn't believe in God.
Well, Tip, think about the good thief on the cross. You know, this life that maybe, just maybe, you were like Jesus to him in that moment of welcoming him into paradise when he was in his last possible seconds of life.
That's my hope, of course, that it got him into the threshold. But
So
I really don't know what.
Yeah.
So Tip, I know it's hard to talk about the war, and you can share anything you want to or don't want to share. But as we talked about at the beginning, there's a lot of young people out there that don't feel connected to their history and that don't understand the battles that have been won and that don't understand what it's actually like to be on a battlefield and not just on a battlefield in a video game. And so when you share those things, you're making a sacrifice, by going back there and reliving that suffering, which is what you're doing. You're also enabling the young people watching to have a lens into that and to say, oh, okay, maybe I understand on a different level than I did before. So maybe you could talk about lessons you learned from being in the infantry in World War II, or maybe you could talk about, what did we win in world? What does humanity? What do we win in war, and what do we lose in war?
We lost a lot of bodies. We lost a lot of things that. After the war, I was sent to a place in Lundford, Germany, and we had a enemy stockade there, and they would all of the prisoners would try to sell different things to the soldiers that were guarding them. And well, I'd rather not tell.
That's fair.
That is fair. Tip, you had mentioned to me before, some tough experiences, being not just in the Battle of Bulge, but, these moments of intense suffering that, that in many cases, not perhaps just you, but many soldiers who went through those things, because of the chaos of what war is, many records are lost or confused or all kinds of things. Like I have a cousin who's around your age, and he was in the war, but they kept transferring him from battalion to battalion. And it turns out that on his birth certificate, his dad had named him something that his mom didn't want him to be named. So, but he never knew that, so he would always go by Ralph Martin, but somebody else would always, so they kept transferring him, and because of that, he didn't end up going to war at all. So he somehow survived it all, but his records were all confused and lost in different ways, and I feel like that's perhaps the case for some people. And what you had shared with me is, being in the midst of
my
some of that.
records were lost, and I had to stay in the service over a month till they found my records so I could be discharged. I couldn't be discharged without having the golden goose given to me. And just the one impression I want everybody to know, that war is not like it's in the movies. It's It may be for some people, I guess, maybe, but not for me. I just don't like what happened in the war.
Tell us more about what you mean, Tip. Why is it not like it is in the movies? It's not, maybe you mean it's not glamorous, or it's not...
Right. They glamorize it and make it look like it's all according to the character, you know, that they do the great things. Everybody don't do great things in the war. There's very few of them, in fact, that do the brave things that, and you sometimes don't feel like that you want to be a part of the misery that goes with some of the ones that don't have that type of personality to go forward and save a lot of lives and do this and that and the other, that just don't compensate for that.
I would think that there's, as a man, it's probably the most fear you're ever experiencing. And I think a lot of times when we feel fear, we can also feel shame that we feel that fear.
Right. I agree. Y'all know better. Y'all should give this thing myself instead of me.
Oh no.
Well, no,
Y'all
but even Tip, even for you to say yes, that's right. I can't know if that's right. I was guessing based on what you're saying.
Well, that's...
I'm hearing you say that there are men there that
An
are...
update from the Wave storm tracking team has arrived.
Your phone says that you're good. Keep going.
I'm hearing you, talk about that men do things in war that aren't heroic, and we don't necessarily... And I know a lot of that, I'm sure, is motivated from that fear, from that self-preservation. And then you feel ashamed. Something I'm thinking about is, I forget what the name of it is, but sometimes when someone's house burns down, the parents are outside and their kids are in the house, and they can't force themselves into the fire because they're so paralyzed by fear that they can't actually get in. Even if they could save their kids, they can't make themselves do it. And I can't imagine what the weight would be after that, right? The shame, the guilt, the reliving. What could I have done differently? What could I have done better? And so I'm thinking, I'm sure it's a similar effect, that there are probably opportunities that
Yeah, it's kind of like you've heard of these incidents that happen when the parent thinks that the other parent was taking care of the child, and the child got in the way of a car and got backed over and killed, and neither one really, each one of them thought that the other one was taking care of the child, and they weren't careful enough to locate it before the child got in front of the car. So
I can't imagine those types of things.
That could be just, usually they break up after that, so, because they blame the other person, I guess, or they don't. Well, anyway.
Tip, you had said these tragedies, this kind of suffering, especially during the war, is oftentimes over glamorized.
Right.
And and it's not like the movies. Though I did hear a story, and I'm not gonna say it's definitely right or not, but it would make sense to me based on the intensity of it. But there's a famous movie that depicts World War II pretty powerfully, and that's called Saving Private Ryan. And it was made back in the 1990s, and it was all about these this team of men going into the behind enemy lines to save a man whose other 3 brothers had died in the battle. And there's this opening scene of this movie is the beginning, the moment the men stormed the beaches of Normandy and everything that took place there. And apparently some of the men who lived through Normandy were there when it first came out in the movie theaters. And it was so intense and realistic that the men who had gone through it left the theater during that opening scene because it brought back a lot of those memories, and the PTSD was pretty intense. And I remember seeing that scene myself, and that just a lot of that the carnage, the chaos that on a movie screen for a lot of young people, even, or video games, like we said, that seems to be, well, I'm on the other side of the screen. I'm not in danger.
Right.
I can watch other people suffer, but I'm not affected by that, But to live through that, I feel is a little bit different.
It is, I guarantee you. They're following primarily one man or a group of men, and it glamorizes the fact that they do the right thing and they're brave enough to go. But there's others that are not brave enough or don't have the same personality to realize what they could do, So it's one of these forms that like I've had friends in service that they know exactly where everything they did, where they were, every little incident, they knew where they were all during the war. I never knew that. I mean, I just didn't follow it that closely because I was there. I mean, he just
focused on the task at hand, what
Right.
you had to do to get through each day. Well, I think at this moment, maybe we will take a quick pause and take a moment to let our audience kind of debrief, and we'll be back in a short while on Spirit Spire as we continue our story in time with Oliver Thibodeaux. Hey everyone, another sponsor for today's episode is the Cathedral of the Assumption in the heart of downtown Louisville, Kentucky. It is the spiritual center of parish and family life and is a historic treasure for the Catholic Church in America. Take a tour or consider visiting for Mass. Check them out at cathedraloftheassumption.org. Welcome back to Spirit and Spire, everyone. We've been interviewing our good friend, Mr. Oliver Thibodeaux. Tip, he has been a great friend for many years, and he was in World War II, and so we've been talking a lot about some of that experience, after his childhood and graduation from high school, entering the war and wanting to do aviation, but eventually moving toward the infantry and facing the experiences in the Battle of the Bulge. That's what we talked about in our last segment, and you'd even mentioned to me at different times that you had been a prisoner of war, and while those were maybe short stints, I mean, there's still
Right.
some level of wow that you had. I mean, the very fact that you can say that is powerful and difficult and amazing for many people who have no concept or no experience or any feeling like that would ever happen in their own lifetime. You know, there are many people today, young people, who are so detached from anything like that, that to even hear that to them might grip their attention, might say, wow, who is this guy? Like, how can I get to know him? Maybe he has something to teach me. Even if it may have seemed insignificant living through it at the time, there's something powerful to be said. And first off, I just thank you, Tip, for your service, but also your life. You know, not just the short time you were in the war and all the difficult suffering, but even the aftermath, having to live with it. You know, that is a sacrifice in and of itself. And not knowing necessarily what was going on at the time because of all the intensity of what you were experiencing, it shows to me your character because of what you did when you came home and the stability and commitment and faith you showed in your life after that. So I thank you.
You're welcome.
So with that, I mean, do you have anything from the war onward that you would like to share, or about life after the war, or as you left?
How'd you meet your wife?
Yeah, simple things like that.
My wife was a friend of my sister. They worked at Seagram's Distillery, and I met her through my through my sister.
And what do you remember how you met? Like, did she set you up on a date, or did you meet her at a party? Do you remember?
No, she came to visit my sister.
Oh, at home.
At
so
home.
you moved? Did you move back in with your parents after the war?
Well, yeah.
Okay. So how old were you when you moved? Because you said you were in Germany. Do you remember roughly how old you were when you were discharged?
It must have been about, 21 or 22.
Okay. So you moved back in with your parents then. And did you get a job right away, or was that sort of a time of rest and recuperation?
By the time I got back from the war, they had running water inside. And we didn't, when I went into service, we were using a well and a cistern. And the well was used for drinking and utilizing but the cistern was used for cleaning clothes and taking baths.
Yep.
If you take a bath during that time, everybody took a bath on Saturdays. That was the way life was at that time.
Once a week.
Whether you needed it or not.
Right, right.
Well, there's a lot to be said for that maybe that would cut down a lot of cancer that people get nowadays, because they do take showers every day. And
maybe you're right. They're not as exposed to the natural
world.
world.
They're not exposed to some of these things that are in the water.
Yeah, you just got to build up your immunity, right?
So Tip,
so I worked.
So we wanted to hear about meeting your wife.
Well, it wasn't any big deal. I mean,
well, how'd you ask her out on a date? Like, what did you do? A lot of guys don't know how to ask girls on dates at all today. How did you do it?
Was it love at first sight, or did you have to woo her? What?
No, we used to. I came to Louisville, and she lived in Louisville, and I used to go over to their place over on
Where she lived?
Phillips Lane, over on Phillips Lane. They had a house there, and I went to U of L, and while I was going to U of L, I'd go and spend evenings over there.
So who had the house? Is this your sister?
Now this was her mother and father,
What was your wife's name, by the way?
Margaret.
Margaret. Okay. So Margaret lived with her parents.
And
Right.
he'd visit her
And you'd
while
go visit.
in
Okay.
the evening.
Very
And I was
suave.
going to U of L, and I stayed in a dormitory.
That's right.
And I graduated in 1951.
Is that your ring?
Yep.
College ring. Look at that. That's cool.
1951.
Wow.
What did you get your degree in?
Industrial management.
Okay. Now, okay, so you're going over to her house. Were you guys talking marriage right away?
No. I graduated in 51, and that's when we got married, in 51.
So things moved pretty quick back then.
And I got, we lived over on, got an apartment on 3301 Utah Avenue. And then we had a son and a daughter, and we moved into the house at 3007 Louise Avenue and been there ever since. But I worked at Reynolds Metal Company as production control. Then I went to 14X down at 28th and Hale. And then I went back to Plant 14 at 2000 South 9th Street.
So you went from 1951, you were working after you graduated.
Right.
Until you retired at
I had
70.
I had a job out of GE, promised, and then they changed the format of when they would want me.
Gotcha.
Because they moved the one plant, number one plant, became the ones that moved in to number two plant.
Yeah.
And then 3, 4, 5. But anyway, when they told me they wanted me, I didn't have sense enough to lie to them and tell them they were going to pay me a lot more than I was getting paid. I'd already established myself, and I liked the work that I was doing, so I stayed at Reynolds instead of going out and getting a higher paying job out there, I guess.
So you had 2 kids, right? Is what you said?
Yeah, I had.
What?
And then we had 2 more.
Oh,
after
that's
that.
right. That's right. What lessons did fatherhood teach you?
Oh, I got a lot of lessons from them. I listened to my children. We had great times. People that don't have children, I think, are missing a whole lot and I know you can verify that they miss a whole lot of learning from the children, because the children are so innocent. They ask you questions that make you wonder. They make you think about the good and the different things that are funny, and yet they make you proud of them because they're thinking and they're doing things that make you wonder more so about what a little bug is thinking or something, you know, in their minds, which makes me wonder, with all these big planes flying now that are packing tons of materials inside, what does a bird think when they see it coming?
Right.
So, I mean, it's a learning experience. You get a lot of different things from children because they're clear thinking. They're not.
Yeah, they're pure of heart.
Right.
You know, it's like what Jesus tells us: unless you become like little children, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. And it feels to me like there's that childlike spirit within you, Tip, after all the games of ping pong and Wii Bowling, as I mentioned before. You still do that.
Well, those 50 games were all earned while I was in my 90s.
That's amazing.
What lessons did being a husband teach you? What did you learn from your wife?
That's a good question.
Learn to say yes, dear. Whatever you say. No, that we never. My wife was one that always told my children until I stopped it that wait till your daddy gets home. Well, by the time I got home, they had forgotten all about what it was that she was going to tell me that. So those are the kind of things that you punish your child at the time it happens, because you don't, the child is not going to remember from the time that they do something that the mother didn't like, and to say, wait till your father gets home and I'll tell him, they just don't relate to that, because they have to have immediate, because they're not tied down to where they want to have punishment hanging over their heads all the time.
Yeah.
What the sacrifices that are required to be a husband and a father? What do you think about sacrifice and the meaning that it can give a man?
Well, I think that you have to definitely realize that you have to be the fourth runner and make sure that you don't spend more than you have to spend. I hear of these people that owe $15,000 or more.
Yeah.
I've never been in debt. Never. My parents, when they taught me if you can't afford it, you don't need it. God will give you the things that you need, but the things that you want are on your own.
That is very true.
Yeah, that's beautiful advice. That's pertinent to me. I struggle to stay focused on a budget, and you know, so it's something that I'm trying to learn right now.
Well, there are so many different things that the advancement of science and stuff have allowed. I've got a watch here now that tells me
it's a smartwatch.
Pretty cool watch.
When my grandson gets here, he's going to set it up for me, but it's not set right now.
Okay.
So it's not quite smart yet.
But
it connects to your phone.
It connects to the phone with a
Bluetooth.
Bluetooth.
Yeah.
And it tells you all of those. Well, you can schedule it whatever you want to schedule it.
Yeah.
But it tells you what your heart rate is and whatever you want to, how many steps you take and how many
keeps track of a lot of things.
How many breaths you take.
Tip, what do you think's the most significant technological advancement in your lifetime, or maybe one or two?
Oh boy, there's a whole lot of them.
What's changed the world the most, do you think, or changed how people live the most?
I really can't. There's so many different things that advance. I've got a car that has more significant things on it, and I think that's probably the best solution, that we're definitely not doing the best we can do to make life on the planet livable. We're doing things that are contrary to what taking care of the planet means, and doing all these things that one country may be doing one thing, but some other country would be doing something else. And we can't control what other countries do, and sometimes can't even control what we do in our own country.
And a lot of it's against God's plan for creation, for the world, you know?
Well, now they're trying to have trips to the moon and things for
people to live up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard some
I think
of that.
we ought to send all the prisoners up there.
Oh, that's terrible.
Let them fight themselves out.
My goodness. Well, there's
But anyway,
there's one thing that that I know that you've been committed to throughout your life that I'd like to mention in our last segment that we'll make very short, you know. So we'll do a quick pause and then we'll be right back. All right. So everyone will be right back on Spirit Inspire after this.
Hey everyone, here at Spirit Inspire, we want to serve our community by highlighting God's work in our parishes, schools, and apostolates. We hope to bring renewal and unity between all those in the body of Christ. If you would like a shout out in the next episode of Spirit Inspire, go to spiritinspire.com or email us at spiritinspire@gmail.com. Thanks and God bless.
Welcome back, everyone, to Spirit Inspired. This is our final segment with Mr. Oliver Thibodeaux. He was in World War II. He's had a pretty powerful story and amazing life filled with lots of adventure. And he's also been a hardworking man who's loved his family and been very committed to them throughout his life. He's 98 and a half years old, and he's gotten 5,300 score Wii Bowling games, and he beats me in ping pong anytime I've played him. So, but I think one of the most powerful things that I've gotten to know Tip about is his commitment to life and family, and the importance of being in favor of life, especially when it comes to the most innocent people in the world, young people, babies even. And so, Tip, do you have any words of wisdom to share with young people, young families, when it comes to having children and being open to life?
Well, they say that that they should take in consideration the chance of rape or things of that nature. God did not say that we compensate for different things. He said, "Thou shalt not kill," and that doesn't mean anything. Thou shalt not kill a person. This outfit that deals with abortion, all they do is kill. And regardless, that should not take place. They should be prosecuted for killing, in my opinion. And
how can we encourage young people to, who are in difficult situations like that, to trust God through, unexpected pregnancies or
I
anything
think that,
like that?
If a child is unwanted, the mother should have the child and put it up for adoption. I think that regardless of what age restrictions or whatnot, that it's a hard question to answer, but actually I think that the time for a woman to be in charge of her body is in the time of inceptions and not the time that the child is born. But I feel like that the mother these people that say that they can't adopt a child and can't if they're not their own blood relative, that I deny that they can't find in their heart that if they live with that child for a month at least, they will fall in love with that child. Yeah. And that child will always be in love with them because they took care of them when they were small.
Yeah. Where do you find hope from here, Tip, for the world into the future generations as we conclude our time together?
Well, I've always said that the type world we have now is not the type we fought for. But I guess there's compensations that more than someone that has made more in their life than I have, I guess could really appreciate more so than what I have to offer. But I've enjoyed the life I've had. I just still have times when I'd like to be able to, I contribute to different things like the DAV and Memphis, what is the one that is in Memphis that
I'm not sure.
This is like a nonprofit that you'd like to be able
they
to support, or-
they don't charge anything for their hospital in Memphis. No, I can't think of the name of it right now.
But those are places that kind of give you hope.
Right.
People doing good.
I think that if we had, there's a lot of people that don't get credit for things that they offer. And in some cases, they're scams. And they're scams that I've had any number of scams. And thank goodness they're kind of forewarned me now on the telephone that it can be a scam and I don't answer.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So
Yep. You got to be wary, but there are good people in the world. Well, Tip, we think you're one of them, and we're
what's Danny Thomas's place in Memphis?
I'm not sure.
We'll look it up.
Yeah, we'll
look it up on the phone and we'll figure it out.
Yeah. But with that, Tip, it really has been a great joy to be with you, and everyone here who has been able to listen to your story, I know, will have been inspired and drawn into who you are and what you've done to give them a chance to live this life of freedom and love that we're all trying to find. But I
hope it helps somebody.
I know it does. I know it will. And that's the hope, and we pray for young people, we pray for young families, and I know that if there's any hope, it's that your desire is to help other people, and I think your story does that very well.
Most definitely.
So, all right. With that, everyone, I thank you all for being with us. It's been a great gift, and we're praying for you, and we know that it's been a very intense experience, but also a very hopeful and hopefully joyful, time with Mr. Oliver Thibodeaux, my good friend Tip. And with that, everyone, we'll be praying for you, and we will see you next week on another episode of Spirit and Spire. God bless you.
Thank you.